Why are we waiting?
Okay, and hi everybody. Welcome to the 10th episode of Bios and Bookmarks. This is a weekly online reading series featuring Caribbean authors, hosted and powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. I'm Anna Lucy Smith. I'm your guest host just for today to chat with the author of one of my favorite young adult novels of the last few years, Lisa Allen-Agostini. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Anna. And, this is such a pleasure. This is such an unexpected delight because Anna is like always backstage.
I know, I like it that way. So wish me luck on my foray into Facebook Live. Basically, to introduce Lisa to those of you who may not already know her work, and she's widely published, so many of you may already actually be quite familiar with what she's been doing. Lisa Allen-Agostini is a journalist, a poet, a novelist, and a comedian. And her most recent book is the critically acclaimed young adult novel, Home Home. And I just have the 2018 edition from Papilote Press here. And Lisa's going to show you the beautiful cover for the new Delacorte edition, which is actually an extended edition of this book. So she's added a little bit more. So even if you do have the original version at home, I encourage everybody to pick up the new edition from Delacorte because there's a lot to the story. A lot has been added to the story. I love this book a lot, which Lisa knows, and it's something that I've been advocating for to be added as a required reading book at secondary schools in Trinidad, the Caribbean, the wider world, because I think it deserves that recognition because it addresses big issues in an approachable, accessible, and honest way, and is a great way to open up dialogue with the young people in our lives, I think, through books like this. So Lisa, you can tell us a little bit more, maybe give us a synopsis of the book and then give us a reading so we can all get a taste of Home Home before we start chatting.
Okay. Well, Home Home is, as you indicated, quite a short book. I mean, some would even say novella. It's very short. And it's about a Trinidadian girl who's 14 and she has essentially a mental breakdown. She attempts suicide and she's hospitalized in Trinidad. And before she could even think twice, her mom ships her off to Canada to recover by her aunt, who happens to be lesbian and the aunt is lesbian and lives with her partner in Edmonton. And so the girl, I call her the girl because her name in the book is only mentioned in the very last paragraph. So I tend to just call her the girl. Her name is Kyla. So she is diagnosed with anxiety and depression. She goes on medication, she goes into therapy. And so this book is really the story of her having another breakdown while she's in Canada and how that feels for her. And you know, it's very complicated because stigma around mental illness, and also her mom is really very hard on her and doesn't understand that she's ill. She thinks she's just being, as many Caribbean parents do, think you're being self-indulgent when you, you know, what they call act out.
Yes, so, it's a mood you should be able to snap out of. It's not depression, right. It's just a mood.
It's a mood. You need to stop that behavior.
Yes.
And so it's just, the story is about her journey into accepting herself, understanding her condition and how to cope with it, and finding comfort in family, even though that family is not what she's used to and it doesn't look the way she, and I guess a lot of Trinidadians expect family to look. And she got a boyfriend.
Kind of. There's a process towards it. She's working it out in the process of the novel.
when you're 14 and a boy watching you like that's your boyfriend. Once you forget.
Yes, I have. I've forgotten. It's a long time ago. But yes, no, and it's a very authentic story in that way. I mean, she's dealing with the everyday troubles of every teen, but then a bigger issue as well. This kind of mental breakdown that's looming over her at any time while she deals with the day-to-day. Read a little bit from Home Home for us, Lisa, so we can hear the voice.
Okay. I had a nervous breakdown. This is what I remember. I opened my eyes to a white fluorescent strip light. The bed below me was hard and narrow. I tried to turn, feeling the thin sheet sliding on the vinyl mattress cover, and reached out to push myself up. That's when I noticed I was wearing a strange gown and had an IV drip in my arm. I looked around. 5 other kids lay in railed beds like mine around the room, mostly sleeping or playing on their phones. One was awake and looking at me. There was a giant yellow banana painted on the wall behind his bed. I guessed it was the children's ward of a hospital. It was day. I could see light through the windows in one wall, but I couldn't tell what time it was. My stomach burned like acid. I had a sore throat too. Banana Kid heard me clearing it and took it as an invitation to chat. He asked in a friendly, curious tone, "You the one who take tablets to kill yourself? I hear the nurses talking about you." I slumped back down and turned my face away. Luckily, I was in a corner. It was what I deserved anyway, to lie alone in a corner. I was alive. I didn't know how to feel about that. Should I be disappointed or relieved? "Nursey," the banana kid yelled. "Look, the girl who take the tablets, wake up." I swung around to complain, but the words froze in my mouth when I noticed there was a counter by the doorway to the ward, where 2 women in white sat doing paperwork. One of them, a chubby brown-skinned lady, sighed loudly and creaked to her feet. Her lack of amusement showed in her stiff neck. "Shh! Hush, Clive! You feel because you live in here, you could bawl out any old way? Have some behavior." After scolding him in a stage whisper, she said to me in a normal voice, "Missy, how are we this morning?" So it was morning then. As she waddled toward my bed, I shrank back into the hard mattress. She took my arm and checked the IV needle stuck in the bend of it. Clear liquid dripped from the plastic bag hanging on the metal stand, going down a skinny plastic tube into my arm via the needle into my vein. It looked just like on TV, I remember thinking. "Doctor is on his way," she said. She put a blood pressure cuff around my arm and pushed some buttons. I lost interest and looked back toward the wall as she took my temperature and pulse. The machine beeped, squeezed my arm, beeped again, and relaxed. I didn't watch as she unwrapped the cuff. I kept my face to the wall until she said, "Why would a nice young girl like you with so much to live for try to take your own life? That would be such a loss. You are so beautiful." Her tone was kind and sympathetic. I turned just enough to see her face. She had relaxed and wasn't looking so stiff anymore. There was a spark in her eye. "You know who can help you with those feelings?" I shook my head. She leaned in. "Jesus can help you, dear heart. Just call his precious name, Jesus." She closed her eyes and started to pray for me right there. I wasn't offended. On the contrary, it was kind of nice to have someone express regret that I might have died. Still, she was a stranger who was also breathing in my face and making presumptions about my spiritual life. How did she know I wasn't already calling on Jesus and Mary and Joseph and a wide variety of saints? I mean, I wasn't, but I could have been. And wasn't it super unprofessional of her to pray with me? I was a patient. I was pretty sure there were rules about that kind of thing. She rambled on for a while, adding a few verses from the book of Psalms I recognized from church. I was starting to get hungry when the doctor arrived. A tall, skinny old man strode in at the head of a flock of younger doctors. He was the only one not wearing a white coat. Instead, he had on a sharp pinstripe suit. He must have been boiling in the heat. The nurse muttered a hurried amen, handed over my medical chart to him, and stood to one side away from the herd. "So," he said nothing else, just looked at me. The junior doctors were like ghosts standing behind him. My hunger vanished, replaced by a jittery feeling. I wanted to cry. I was on the verge of ripping out the IV and making a run for it when he finally spoke again. "No smartphone, I see. Good. Keep it that way. Social media is terrible for you. So, young lady, I understand you took some tablets?" Why? I had nothing to say. The tears were quivering behind my lashes now, but they hadn't yet fallen. My world was a tight bubble of rage, pain, and shame. I felt dirty and pointless. You know that you could have hurt yourself? I closed my eyes. Of course I knew. That was the whole point. I would hurt myself until the pain stopped forever. The tears squeezed out and ran down my cheeks, but I didn't answer him. How could I explain the ache I felt inside, the torment that ripped me to pieces when I was alone? I hate myself. I think I deserve to be dead. The world would be a better place without me in it. Yeah, right. I could totally tell him that. He would completely get it. He waited still. Stubbornly, I remained silent. Finally, he said kindly, "We'll keep you under observation for a few days. The medication you took can cause permanent organ damage, so we'll watch to make sure that didn't happen. I want to talk to you about why you took the tablets. Did you mean to harm yourself?" There it was, the big question. Crazy girl, were you trying to commit suicide when you swallowed a full bottle of your mother's painkillers? I opened my teary eyes and darted looks at the doctors and the ward behind them. Banana Kid leaned forward in his bed. The nurse raised an eyebrow and pursed her lips. I lay back. I closed my eyes and pretended to go to sleep. When I wouldn't answer any more questions, the doctor talked quietly to the nurse before touching my shoulder. "She's going to give you some medicine," he said, and left. From behind my closed eyelids, I heard him being followed by the cloud of younger doctors. The nurse remained and fiddled with my drip. Then she too left me alone, and I drifted off.
Thank you, Lisa. I think we jumped right into one of the heaviest scenes in the book there, so we get a really good taste of what issues your girl, your main character, is dealing with. A lot of the praise around this book has been about how accessible it is, how your language is conversational, and we're dealing with these heavy issues, but we see it through the eyes of a 14-year-old girl in age-appropriate and relatable ways. Is this something that you always knew you wanted to do, to tackle these sorts of issues for that age group? Is it something that you intended to with the book? Is there a message that you're telling for that age group?
When you say always wanted to do, you mean with the book?
With this
or
book,
like in life?
Any book in life. Is it something, because you, as I've said before, when I introduced you, you write in every genre of writing there is. You could have tackled mental health in, a more journalistic essay form, drawn on your own experiences maybe, but you've chosen to address this issue in this forum and like this format, which is for young adults really. And I wonder if you have, if that was like almost like a calling for you, if you felt that was the age group you wanted to speak to with this book, or did it just kind of happen?
Well, as you said, I write in many other genres, and as a journalist, I remember I was working on Vox magazine, which was a young people's magazine published by the Sunday Express many, many, many years ago, like 20 years ago or something. And I used to write a column in there, and I remember writing about mental illness and feeling depressed and suicidal. And Judy Raymond, who was my editor at the paper, sending it back and saying, "But why? You need to explain this. You need to explain this. You need to explain this more." And so, and throughout my journalism career, I've covered suicide. I've covered not like going out to cover when someone has committed a suicide. I mean, I've written I've been a feature writer basically. And so I've written features. I did a whole series on mental health and suicide in Trinidad and Tobago, discovering that we have had in many years more suicides than murders.
Wow. I was not aware of that terrifying statistic. Yeah.
No, because
and if we know our murder statistic, that's terrifying in itself. Yeah.
Right. So like a few years ago, the murder rate just sort of went off. But before that point, there were years when there was as many or more suicides than murders. We are a people who have profound struggles with depression, profound struggles with relationships.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's something that I've written about throughout my journalism career. This book, however, I just started writing and that's what came out.
Okay.
And it came out in the way it did. I I don't know why it did, but it's funny that it did. And and it was always meant to be for young people because the first lines of the book are as this girl is she's trudging down the highway because she's too anxious to stop to get the bus because she's too anxious to pick to be able to understand what she reads on the original name of the manuscript was Waiting for the Bus because there was always a moment where she was waiting, she was expected to take the bus home, and her anxiety around figuring out which bus where it goes, you know, how to get the bus, how to come off the bus, it paralyzed her. So she ended up walking miles home, and she's having this panic attack as she's walking home. And she was a girl, and she was Trinidadian, and she was in a strange place. And the story just sort of flew from there. It flew, I don't know.
It flew. Oh, if only we could all, we could only have our stories fly onto the page with your talent. Nicely done. I mean, it flew beautifully and it really tells a very powerful story. And one of the most powerful things about it, I think, is, we're talking about anxiety, depression, panic attacks. But the Publisher Weekly review describes this book as quietly optimistic. I mean, one of the things I would say about it is there's this resilience and hopefulness throughout the whole story. And I mean, is that a conscious message that you've put into it, or is that just natural to you to be hopeful in the way you discuss these things? I mean, you have a natural flair for comedy as well, so maybe it's something natural to your style. But were you conscious of that in writing it, that you were taking depression and always with a hopeful outlook?
Well, I mean, it's just responsible. How are you going to write a book about a depressed, 14-year-old girl and say, nah, this is rubbish. She's just going to, you know what I mean? But I think the nice part of the story is that she finds the hope.
Yes.
That's the, she discovers you're probably going to be dealing with this for the rest of your life. You may or may not need medication for the rest of your life. This is not going to be something that you can poof, just magic away. And given that information and given how challenging her family situation at home is, she has a single mama, and she and the mom fight a lot.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Lisa. That complicated mother-daughter relationship that kind of weaves its way throughout the whole book. Yet she's only with her mother for a short bit of this book because she's actually in Canada with her aunt. And her mother is shown to us through her own recollections and her own kind of stories. And the picture we have of her mother is that her mother doesn't understand her. And in a lot of ways, that leaves like a deep hurt in your main character, that her mother can't see that she's clinically depressed. Her mother thinks she should, just roll with the punches, get over it, and that's the story of how so many people dismiss mental illness, to be honest, and I think that's written into that mother-daughter storyline here. I mean, how does the story unfold between them in this book, and what does it mean?
In the book, well, read the book. Not you. You've read the book, but
yes,
viewers, read the book.
Yes, sure.
But essentially, like many people, her mom. All right, so there's this Caribbean woman who is like a mythic figure. She is like her back broad. She will take anything. She will get up and walk away from any relationship. Man beat she is okay. That's all right. I go get a next man. The house burned down. That's all right. I go build a next house. And there's this kind of like stoicism and way that almost like Caribbean woman in the popular imagination is unbreakable. And that's what her mother is. Not to say she's a stereotype, but she's ordinary. I know that chick, you know, she's like, she down the road from me. Because in a sense, uh, the ability to stop and look inward and think about these things is kind of a luxury and an indulgence. And if you are in the business of finding money to buy groceries and, you know, make sure that this child actually gets to school and so on, you don't have time for all that stuff. You don't. Or it feels like you
Yes.
don't. And so that's what the mom is like. She's like, she's busy, she's trying to get, you know, her work done, she runs a house and her home with the child. And meanwhile, Kyla is unraveling and nobody is there to see and nobody is able to like identify the moment when she decides, you know, I'm done. And she checks out. But the mom is busy doing mom things and doesn't notice.
Yeah.
And so the primary conflict is I think the mom is she's not a reflexive, she doesn't think about deep things. She thinks about like practical things like, you know, how are we going to get through this? And so they have this clash because the mom is just like, this is self-indulgent. I don't have time for this kind of thing. And my mom and I had a difficult relationship. We never articulated it like that, but I was the last child, and there was a widely held sentiment in my family that I was spoiled. Perhaps true. and and so and I was always a writer. I always wrote from the time I was in second year, which is like K2. I had a little journal and I would write.
And your girl has a journal too. It's something
Right.
that her doctor encourages her to have,
Right.
Which is a big part of maybe more so in the extended version of the book, her kind of road to recovery in Canada then. And her doctor is a Dr. Khan, I think is his name. And we're almost given the tools to cope together with her because she's processing his guidance and writing in her journal and analyzing her own relationship with her mother and her own steps towards her recovery through this journal. And I think that it's something that all teenagers could take something home with them from this book in that way, because you've got those little nuggets of wisdom coming from her therapy through your main character to us in a way as a reader. And you also wrote a really beautiful letter to Teen Lisa recently on the it's Storytime Teen Magazine, I think is the name. Yeah, which is an ongoing series.
Yeah.
And it's an ongoing series where authors write letters to their teen selves. And you called your letter, or well, the tagline of your letter was "You deserve good things." And I feel like this whole book, Home, is a love letter to the reader saying you deserve good things, you know, because we are feeling that through this girl's recovery as well. Was the process of writing that letter to yourself as a teenager, because you seem very in touch with who you were as a teenager, you know, you still remember that rage and that emotion, you know, school graduation, these moments in your letter are just as vividly depicted, I think, as the moments that your girl character is having in this book, Home. Was it a similar experience writing a letter to teen Lisa as writing a novel around your main girl's character? Thoughts and processes?
Totally different, because in a novel, even the most autobiographical novel, there's still the evasion of fiction. In a letter to yourself as a child, there's no evasion, there's only the truth, or what you recall to be the truth. I have to tell you, I have a really bad memory.
What? I don't believe it from that letter.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible. I have a bad memory, possibly because I was abused as a child. And a lot of people report that there are like gaps in memory.
Okay, yeah. And you do mention these things in that letter. It's a powerful piece. Yeah.
Thanks. And so the exercise for me was looking at a photograph of myself at fifth form graduation. A night I barely remember, like barely remember.
Okay.
At all.
No further details.
No, I mean, I barely remember. I know I went. I know I have a very clear memory about what I wore because I designed it. And I went and I bought the fabric. I think my sister must have given me $50 to go in Peters and buy cloth. And I bought it. I bought the fabric. I went and I got it made because in those days, all working class Black families had a seamstress. This would have been 30 years ago. And everybody had a seamstress. Our family, we had two. We had Auntie Winnie and Auntie Winks. And I went by Auntie Winks, who was the expensive one. And I went and I got this dress. It was a two-piece thing. I got it made. And, so I remember the process of that.
Yeah.
But the only thing I know is that I had really bad tonsillitis. But I know the circumstances at the dinner. I couldn't eat. Okay. And I had to go to the doctor the next day.
Sounds like a delightful night. No wonder you remember it.
So probably had a roasting fever.
But you know what? I feel most of us feel this way about our graduation. Was it really fun? I'm not sure.
No, terrible.
No, but the dress was fun for sure. That's the part we have to remember.
But the process of writing that was looking at the picture and trying to remember the night, but also trying to remember generally what I was like. I was terrible. I was not a nice human. I don't think. I don't think of myself as a nice human. I was always angry. I was always rude and mean and just, smart enough to be able to say the worst thing to you. Like look at you and be able to identify exactly what was the worst thing I could tell you and tell you. And alienated my family. Because I was so angry. I was hurt. And when you're a kid, and by kid I mean young people up to early 20s, right? Biologically, it's still a kid.
Yes. Oh, definitely.
Brain development.
Yeah.
You don't know how to deal with these things, and nobody tells you, nobody stops you and says, listen, this is not, well, now they do. Okay. In those days, 30 years ago, nobody would come and tell you, your abuse is not your fault. You didn't ask for it, you didn't look for it. And you know what? Even if you did ask for it and you did look for it, you were a child.
Yeah.
An adult should have looked at you and said, no, go in your bed.
And it's one of the reasons why I think this short little book is so important for all of our Caribbean teens to read, because it's opening dialogue on a lot of things. I mean, one short little book that touches on issues of skin color and sense of self-worth, issues of homophobia, issues of, just beyond the mental illness theme. We have so many little bits of truth, and the way they're presented is not in any preachy way. It's done in a way where we are processing along with your main character as she is first being exposed to these things as a 14-year-old girl. So that's why I say it's incredibly age appropriate. It's the opening of this conversation, and it's a great way for the adult in that teenager's life to kind of continue those conversations with them and help shape them and shape their sense of self-worth coming out from this book. I mean, I think what we're talking about is really resonating with a lot of people because we have some comments coming in. So yes, people say you have powerful reading, Lisa. That's from Lisa Marie Campbell Gooden. And Lisa Williams says, this is a great conversation. We have Monique Roffey saying you look like a goddess, which is very true. Thank you, Monique. That's the kind of comment we need to keep us, motivated.
Thank you, Monique.
Yeah. Yeah. And Shivani Ramlochan, who we know well, says, I love the depiction of Auntie Gillian and Julie as strong, beautifully constructed queer partnership. Do you think it would have been more difficult to write about Gillian and Julie if they lived in Trinidad and were offering the narrator sanctuary from a home-based place here? I mean, that's a very good question. Hey, maybe Shivani should have been doing this interview.
No, not at all.
Thank you, Shivani. Keep it coming.
Shivani knows
there's a lot of good stuff. There's a lot of good stuff here. Yeah, what do you think, Lisa?
That's a good question. I don't know. I hesitate to say I know so few same-sex couples living as like romantic partners in Trinidad that this almost doesn't even, it's not even like a possibility I could consider.
But it's
I
so
know
striking as
so-
well that she's sent to Canada without her mother ever even mentioning that that her aunt is in this long-term relationship as well, isn't she? It's kind of like she turns up in Canada and is suddenly like, oh, okay, my aunt isn't a single professional woman. She's in a long-term committed relationship
she's
that
practically
nobody
married.
mentioned. Yeah, it's presented in that way. So already it's a secret within that Trinidad environment that she's grown up in. You know, this is her aunt, her mother's sister, but she has no understanding of her personal life.
I spoke to, I did an interview with some young people, some students at the University of Puerto Rico, and it was just recently published in BIM.
Okay.
There's a new issue of BIM out, and so it was published this week. And one of the things that came up in the interview was Rosamund King, her book on queerness in the Caribbean, and she has an essay in there called El Secreto Abierto.
Yes.
Which is essentially translated as the open secret. And that's how a lot of Caribbean societies approach homosexuality. Like, you could be gay, but keep it over there, keep it private between you and the people who you're gay with. And we don't want it brought into our mainstream heterosexual space. And it's kind of like that, I think, for the mom, like, whatever the sister is up to in Canada, I don't even think the mother disapproves. I don't think she disapproves. I think she loves her sister and has a good relationship with her sister, but doesn't want to engage, like so many Trinidadians.
Yes.
Don't want to engage. Like, why do I have to know about your private personal business and who you're sleeping with? That's your business. I don't care. I don't want to know about it. Keep that for your people.
Yeah.
You know, and so I have, there are many public figures in Trinidad society who are gay. Let's just say that.
Yeah.
But up until when was the case? When was the case? Was last year or the year before?
Maybe 2 years ago. Is it that long?
I think it might be 2 years ago.
Yeah.
But before that case, which is Jones versus Trinidad and Tobago, we had one gay Trinidadian, and that's Godfrey Seeley. No, we had two, Peter Minshall. Nobody was out.
They were not public with their personal lives. Even if they're public figures, that's something that, as you say, is more or less kept private. Which I suppose mental illness is as well. These things are all treated as taboo. You know, you can acknowledge that they're there, but it's in a very flippant, dismissive way that's not in our sphere. It's not something we need to address, you know?
Right.
And I wonder if, so your character is not named until literally, I think, the second to last line or something, or the last page of the novel. And Trinidad in itself is a place that you describe in a lot of, not picturesque detail, but a lot of social detail. Like the social interactions of Trinidad are very vivid in this book, and they're done very well. Like any teenager reading this book will recognize the Trinidad they know. Like, I mean, the experience of going through SCA, the experience of feeling like you've failed, you know, and you go to a bad school, or all these little things, social experiences that your main character has. She starts off talking about home, and it's like this double emphasis. She's very rooted in the place, and Canada is the foreign place. Towards the end of the book, when we see her named and we see her coming to a kind of place of self-acceptance, she's choosing to stay in Canada. Is that a deliberate movement that you see, that she's moved away from Trinidad almost as the place that didn't accept her, or the place that maybe her imperfections were judged rather than supported? Am I reading that correctly, or am I reading too much into your relationship?
No, I think you're
or the
correct.
Relationship you're telling? Yeah,
I think you're correct. I just hadn't thought about it like that before. But yeah, there is a movement away, and ultimately, home is where you're loved and comfortable and accepted.
Yes.
You know,
and home shifts in a way towards the end of this novel, I think. Yeah. I mean, everything we're saying, some people in comments are saying as well. Desiree C. Brown says, Black Caribbean women, particularly, such a harmful trope. Agreeing with you with that that image you painted of the Caribbean woman.
Stoic.
You know, stoic, could take anything. We'll never break down, you know. And Eugene Speak says, as someone living with a panic disorder, this was one of the most accurate and thoughtful books I've read on the subject.
Oh,
so it's really, yeah, good stuff coming in here. And I mean, it, you know, should, I mean, I feel that way, and I think it's so important that teenagers are exposed to this kind of stuff, because as you say, so much is covered up. It's there, but it's covered up. And what we need is a really open conversation, you know. I think that maybe now would be a good time for you to read another piece from the book, and we can see what other comments come in, and see where the conversation takes us after that.
Okay, this is a short, this next reading is very short, and it's very sort of apropos of Black Lives Matter. Remember, this is what our heroine looks like. Home, home, brown skin is the norm. Walk through downtown San Fernando, my hometown, and you'll see a spectrum of complexions ranging from palest ochre to darkest ebony. It's beautiful to me. As a child, I took it for granted. My world was full of brown people who looked like me. They lived next door, loaned me books at the library, drove the buses I rode, read the news on TV, and ran my government. I hardly ever saw white people in real life. On TV sitcoms, yeah, all the time, but not doing ordinary stuff like taking out the garbage. Being Black in a Black country doesn't mean race isn't important, though. I was a dark-skinned girl. So-and-so was a red-skinned lady. So-and-so was a brown-skinned fella. I had a neighbor everyone called Blacks because his skin was so dark. Nobody said it out loud, but skin color mattered. The lighter your skin, the more desirable you were for a job, for anything really. A light-skinned mixed-race girlfriend with long, wavy hair was the gold standard if you were a boy, no matter your race. Girls freaked out over light-skinned boys, red man, as though they were some kind of prize. Even Kiki, that's her best friend, said her grandmother wanted her to marry someone who would add some milk to the coffee and give her light-skinned grandchildren one day. As a bony, dark-skinned girl with short, kinky hair, I felt I was nobody's first pick. Matchstick, charcoal, bun bun. Those were some of the nicknames the other kids called me. My personal fave was Kobo, after the pitch-black vultures that lived on garbage and dead dogs in the dump. In my primary school graduation class photo, I was a dark, unsmiling smudge with huge eyes, hiding in the back row behind the lighter, smiling faces. Though Kiki always told me I was pretty, I never believed her. If a dark, skinny girl with picky hair was pretty, why weren't there more people like me at home in the advertisements on TV? Pale Indian faces adorned billboards for skin lightening cream, Bollywood movies, and rum. Light-skinned mixed-race people sold pretty much everything else, from car batteries to rum. Everybody sold rum. I have to admit, they put a lot of dark-skinned soca singers on billboards. I liked Fayan best of all. She had short hair, even shorter than mine.
Thank you, Lisa. Another very powerful reading, and very, very topical, something that I think a lot of young people are talking about on their own anyway right now. So it's meaningful, definitely. And okay, a question, comment from Nicholas Laughlin. I'd love to hear from Lisa if she's had comments from teenage readers of the book and if they were what you expected.
Well, Bocas, in conjunction with BERT and NALIS and the Ministry of Education, did a tour, which the lovely Anna facilitated. Actually, she was the administrator of the tour, and she was very intrinsic to it. And we went to 12 schools in over a month two
just
years
about.
ago. And it was a really good experience. It was me and Kevin Hussein, and we went to schools all over the place: San Fernando, Central, Town. Didn't go to Tobago.
We'll remedy that one day soon, shall we? We'll take a trip. We'll go, Lisa. We'll go and visit them, our own tour. Yeah, we can't leave out Tobago.
And so I got a number of young people responding to the book in the readings I did there, and also through their teachers and like librarians and stuff. And generally speaking, I think they appreciated that it was such a short book. I was telling you this, Anna.
Yes. Of all the things, but it's short. Yes. Yeah, about 100 pages really, yeah. And is the extended version is a little longer.
Right. I mean,
not by much.
Like
yeah.
25 pages longer. It's not that much.
Right.
Okay. This one claims to be 150. You print big.
It's a good number. It's a good number. Still very approachable.
Yeah.
And we know that we have literacy issues in our secondary schools. That's another open secret, I'm sure.
Right.
So
they appreciated it being a short book, and they also they found a lot of commonalities with the character. And every school I went to, when I asked the question, do you know anybody who feels like this? Hands went up. Right. So I was really glad to be able to, as you said, open a discussion, because this is not a thing that you talk to adults about. It's not a thing, So you and your friend, your friend is cutting or drinking bleach or doing some other heinous stuff to themselves, and they're not telling their parents. You can't tell their parents. You can't tell the teachers. You don't know who, there's no safe adult where you feel like this information will be treated with respectfully and will be treated with helpfully. So they just basically have their little cabals in the classroom where they know who is feeling whatever and who's doing whatever, and who, and they try to deal with it and cope within their own circle. And that's kind of crazy, because you're kids.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. We forget that sometimes in how we talk about violence or issues in our secondary schools. We forget that we're talking about children sometimes, in the way that they're presented in the newspapers and all of that. And children have to be spoken to and given a supportive environment to feel safe. They have to feel safe in that environment before we can even start to address the bigger issues happening in our schools. And we ask a lot of our teachers, to be honest. And I'm glad that the Bocas Lit Fest can supplement a bit of what's happening in the schools by providing books like these through the Code Burt Award for Caribbean Young Adult Literature program. And we can have authors like you go in and visit, and it really adds something to the classroom discussion and dynamic, and to creating that safe space. At least I hope that's the value we hope to leave in the classrooms after we take an author like yourself or Kevin in there to talk. And it's a different discussion from what they'd have when they're stuck on the syllabus, when you're in this rigid system. So Loretta Collins Kloba, I think it's Loretta Collins Kloba is asking, hi, yes, if you could talk a little bit about the changes or additions that were made with the new publication for Delacour. What was that process like? And was it your decision, Lisa, to add to it? Did you want more? Was it you said the story's not finished, I have to add another scene?
So way before there was even a Burt Award, I had written this manuscript like years and years ago, and it was sitting around in my house, and I offered it to Donna Benny, who has an imprint called
Star Apple.
Correct, Star Apple. And she's like, I like this, but you need to make it longer. And she handed it back to me, and I was like, no. And I went away. And the minute Burt dropped there was a
minimum page requirement in the award, yes. Yeah.
The minute they dropped it to 20,000 words, I was like, this is for me. So I submitted it as is. And the first thing, Polly Patullo, who is Papillon Press, which is this adorable.
Yes, the first edition.
The first thing she said was, we need to make it longer. So she sent me in at these key points to try to insert more. And I tried and tried and tried, and God bless her, Polly was so patient with me, and I could not add much more. I just couldn't. I don't know. At the time when I sat down to write, it was like blood from stone. and I made maybe some small tweaks. But by the time I got to the Delacorte edition, this is now the third editor / publisher telling me this has to be longer.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I must take the book finally. And I sat down, and when I sat down, and you know what it is too? Polly Knows the Caribbean. My new editor, I don't know if she knows the Caribbean, but she didn't bring that to our conversation. So a lot of explaining and a lot of like, she'd be like, you know, is this really? And it's like, yes, actually. So some of the emails, so like we had a conversation, her name is Monica Jean at Delacorte.
Yeah.
And Monica and I had an email exchange about that same passage I just read about skin color in Trinidad. And she was like, it actually came out of a line that had been in the first edition and still is there, about the color of the boy's skin being like an apple when you just cut it. And she's like, oh, you know, there's a lot of criticism about Black people being described as food colors. I'm like, really?
I can really go to town with this.
So maybe it was that, but I found it, I found I could access some writing in that edit that I had not been able to or had not tried hard enough, I guess, to be able to access before. So yeah, it's kind of funny.
And I mean, about 2.5 years, maybe almost 3 years between, in 2018 was the first edition, is that correct? With that Polly published, and then in May, at the end of May, is when the Delacorte edition was released. So you've had quite a lot of time to sit on this book, and you've also gotten feedback through the school tours and meeting with young people. And I think let it be a lesson to all of us that one of the big comments from your student readers is that they enjoy the length of this book. And we have all the professionals in the world telling you, you need to make it longer. But you know what? I mean, maybe that's not really the case, that what you had to say was said in a way that the age group can appreciate. So I don't know, maybe that's just a lesson we could take away from it, that the length is not what counts with a book. There's a lot more to it.
But that's an industry thing. That is not, it's actually not anything to do with readers. It's about the perception that
classify.
So the cost of this and the cost of this in terms of production, this might be 50 pages more, but it costs the same to produce. And it also costs the same to buy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when you are selling a much smaller book at the same price as you're selling a much larger book, there's the perception by the reader, or they have the perception that the reader will not want to buy the smaller book because it's like less value for money.
Right.
But that's not how books work. So
No, it's about the reading experience, isn't it? Which you can pay a lot of money for or no money for, and could be great, could be bad. Nothing to do with length. But that's one of the hard truths of publishing, isn't it? And it's one of the things that authors learn the hard way, unfortunately, or over time you realize that this is a business. And there's a lot more to it than just being a good writer. Yeah, it's a hard truth for sure.
So much more.
Yes. So Lisa, we're coming down to the end of our time, and as you know, we've prepared a little game. So this is a tradition now with bios and bookmarks, that we have 3 envelopes, envelopes with a question in them, a surprise question for you. Which will you pick to answer question 1, 2, or 3? Which envelope?
Shuffle them and I'll pick an envelope.
Oh, wait, off the screen? I'm okay.
It's just shuffle and I'll pick. I can't read no, I see the numbers.
No,
turn it around.
Scribble.
Turn it around and shuffle. Like I can't see. I don't want to see the numbers.
Okay.
Pick an envelope.
So which one? Pick 1, 2, or 3.
Hold up.
Don't overthink it.
I'm overthinking it. That's how I work. This one.
I can't see your finger, Lisa.
I can't see
not
my
on my
finger
screen.
You're
gonna have to call out
the one in the middle. Whatever, the one in the middle.
Okay, that is question number 3. I hope it's a good one. Let's see.
They were all good questions.
So And these are written by, I think, our social media assistant, Alana Gopal. She writes very good questions. She's done 10 of these now. So, Lisa, which writer from present or past would be considered a dream interview for you? For somebody who's interviewed so many people, this is a very good question for you.
It's actually a terrible question for me. Which writer? You know, if I'm being perfectly honest, Anna, I will say St. Paul. Or whoever was the author of the St. Paul epistles.
Okay, wow. Was not expecting that one. Came out of nowhere. Okay.
No, I mean,
a reason, or is it just a feeling?
Yeah, I do, because I'm a churchical girl, despite the attitude towards religion in the book, which is kind of like, I'm very churchy, and I am Christian, and the letters of St. Paul are incredibly misogynistic, but they are like foundation of the church. And I wanted to know, well, I had a question for St. Paul. One, what is that thorn in your side? Because, you know, one of the big things about St. Paul is that he says, you know, he's struggling for the Lord and whatever else, but he has this thorn in his side. And we never know what the thorn is, so I'd love to know. And two, why you got to be like that about women? Because I don't think Christ was like that about women. I mean, in his attitudes towards women in the Gospels, Christ is not like that. You know, and St. Paul is only about cover your head, shut up, don't stand up in church and talk. You know, and it's like, So that's who I would like to interview.
Very interesting, which I'm just going to throw in my last question there. So Lisa, what do you think about people who feel that some of the issues in this book shouldn't be addressed with a 14-year-old on the basis of religion, that they are concerned that these topics are not appropriate, or talking about, you know, a lesbian aunt relationship or whatever it may be? I mean, and you've now had the experience of talking about this book with the Form 2 and Form 3 and Form 4 students, and seeing their real and honest response to it.
I will say that faith is incredibly personal, but it also has like certain tenets. And one of the tenets of faith is that your relationship with God is your relationship with God. And that whatever else that people throw at you, once you have a foundation of faith, it will stand. You know what I mean? I also believe that children need more information and not less. If you are never given a choice about anything, how are you going to, you know, like if you're never given an option, you never had an opportunity to think about a situation, then how can you know that what you're doing is the right thing or whatever? That's not coming out quite right, but
no, I understand. I think it is, yes.
It's something about, if you put your children into a box where you deny that things exist, that might be one way to deal with their curiosity, but it's not a good way, because they will eventually find out that these other things exist. And it is the nature of children to go and try to touch. So if it is you trying to keep children away from investigating notions of queerness or investigating mental health options other than, you know, Jesus will save you and Jesus will heal you, then you're going about it the wrong way. I think there is a way that faith can keep us closed off, or a way that our faith can open us up to the world. And I would like to encourage more people of faith to think about God creating us, as flawed and as wonderful and as amazing and as disappointing as we all are. We are God's creation, and crazy in our heads, and sometimes we do strange things, and sometimes we have relationships that don't look like biblical relationships. But God made me so. So I think as people of faith, it's better to investigate and to know and to have a relationship with what is going on, rather than sort of close ourselves off and pretend like it's not happening, because it doesn't help our children, particularly within communities of faith where there are queer children.
Yeah.
And there are many queer children in communities of faith, as there are in communities everywhere. It doesn't help our children, and it doesn't help us in the end, because it just creates bitterness and rancor, and children who feel like they're misunderstood and don't want to talk to you and leave.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's a great note for us to end on, a great message to leave with everybody listening. And I hope that a lot of teachers and parents have tuned in as well and are going to pick up this book. I only have the original cover, which is still equally beautiful. So Lisa's got that one. Yes. So, I mean, it would be nice to have both on your bookshelf and talk about these things with the teenagers in your lives. Lisa, thank you so very much for sharing with us. This, I think, has been quite a heavy, personal and fun conversation at the same time. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm very grateful for all of the comments that were coming in. And thank you everybody for tuning in and listening to me and Lisa. And yes, it's been good, and I hope that people take look up the book, get the book basically, and read it, and send us more comments. You know, afterwards. This video is up there.
This is a great interview, Anna. Thank you very much for doing it.
Oh, Lisa, thank you. Thank you. They'll make me do it again. I'm not going to. I won't do it again. No more Facebook Live for me. No, it's okay. It was really good. I'm glad that my first Facebook Live was with you, Lisa. It made it a little bit easier.
I'm really glad that you did it. It was a very good interview.
Thank you. And thank you everybody for joining us. So this was the 10th episode of Bios and Bookmarks, powered by the NGC Bocas Lit Fest. Thank you for listening. And please read Home Home by Lisa Allen-Agostini. Available everywhere. In particular, Paper-Based Bookshop and Metropolitan Book Suppliers, my two favorite in Trinidad. Yes, look it up there. Yes. Okay, thank you, Lisa. And thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Anna. Bye.
Bye.